Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode. If you're new to the channel, this is Wind Waker Unflooded, a 3D modeling fan art project reimagining the world of Hyrule and the art style of the Wind Waker. You know, of course, if you played Wind Waker, you know that all the islands of its great sea are the mountaintops of Hyrule, but we never get to fully explore Hyrule. We only get to see a small portion of it. So this 3D modeling project is just all about, creating that world, bringing it to life, being able to show you in the form of these videos what would Hyrule look like in the art style of the Wind Waker. This is Wind Waker Unflooded. So come one, come all, welcome to the channel. It's been, I say this often, but I really am so thankful for the YouTube algorithm for spreading the channel, but just like it just means so much to see how many people care about the channel and see y'all's comments and how much it means to y'all, how passionate y'all are about Zelda, and just the fact that y'all share this kind of view of, you've always been imagining this world, and even though we've seen Hyrule since, we've seen it in Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild, and now again in Tears of the Kingdom. We saw Hyrule in Skyward Sword too, excuse me. It's worth counting. I used to not kind of count it in the idea of exploring Hyrule, but I love Skyward Sword. It's just, it doesn't present like an open world, right? Its Hyrule is very segmented, but it is the same land, and I think it's fair to include it as a version of those locations. So I feel like it's a worthy inclusion in the list, even if it doesn't scratch the itch of wanting to explore a world openly. And I think it's interesting. I don't know, not to go down a whole rabbit hole, because I go back and forth in Skyward Sword, and I think it used to frustrate me because I really wanted that open world experience. I loved the Wind Waker as a kid. That's what made me fall in love with Zelda. And in Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword being so segmented in its level design really kind of turned me off. It's like it wasn't the game I was looking for. And it's tough because I think its approach really is valid, right? And the fact that its level design permeates not just into the dungeons, but out. It permeates out. Is that an expression? I feel like permeate is more about soaking in, but I feel like it can also be about out. But what I'm trying to say is like the well-executed level design of like intricate platforming challenges and keeping the player going down an interesting path. It's not just about the dungeons, but it's also about the world exploration, which leads to some of the most interesting overworld design. And something I almost want to incorporate more of that philosophy into this project. Not segmenting it more, but making traversal more interesting. And that's going to take a little more focus into some of these locations. But that's something that's on my radar, is that like as I polish the project and it's it's like there's always going to be more to kind of go back and make more interesting. And I want it to be as interesting as it can be. And it's not going to be as well designed as a Nintendo modeler. But I do want to like make the world more like, I don't know if there's like just like a path on the ground. I want your traversal from point A to point B to be as interesting as possible, even just to think about. So I don't know. It's like, and I think Skyward Sword, like its overworld design is a good example of that. Like it's a puzzle you have to solve on its own, and I think it's really well executed. And I don't know, like I totally resonate. I still resonate with that part of myself that played it on the Wii for the first time and just had that feeling of like, this isn't what I wanted Zelda to be. And I think a lot of people felt that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time had really whet our appetites for what Zelda could be, and especially I think Wind Waker for me. And even Twilight Princess. I think Twilight Princess is interesting because I feel like that world is open and explorable. Even though, like Skyward Sword in a way, it still presents it in a set order, and it's like you're only really going to be playing the game in one order, really. But just because the world is open and accessible and all the areas connect, that does a lot to make the world feel big and explorable. But Wind Waker, I feel like, is just the best example to me, just because it is so open, and Skyward Sword just does not have that openness. But I still love its design, and I didn't get very far when I played it on the Wii originally when it came out, but playing it on the Switch, I just fell in love with Skyward Sword. And even though I do feel like there's issues that I have with it, in the sense of, it, like the way it recycles content. There's a point that I got to in the game where I kind of sighed and go, oh, I'm doing this again. And I had that moment before the game was done. And it's something that's like, oh, I wish the Silent Realms had just been like optional trials. It's like, I don't mind them. I think they're really good spurts of gameplay, but it feels like an easy way of repeating content. And like when I got to like the last Silent Realm, my reaction was like, oh, this is fun. I enjoy doing this again. It's like, oh, another one of these. That was my reaction when I got to it. And same with the imprisoned fight. Like, it's a well-designed fight. You just have to do it so many times. To the point that's, yeah. I don't know. These are my Skyward Sword thoughts. I didn't mean to talk this much about Skyward Sword. But I feel like it's appropriate in a way, because what Skyward Sword led to was the series reinventing itself kind of with Breath of the Wild, going back to the series roots, which is what this video is about from a modeling perspective. What you're seeing on screen is a time lapse of me working on a recreation of the first screen from the original NES Legend of Zelda game. And so this is all a roundabout way of saying, how do we go back to the roots of Zelda? I love Skyward Sword, just that much. It was just kind of on the mind, and I felt like it was worth getting into all that. I could do a video on its own, just unpacking Skyward Sword. I get why maybe there may be people who still feel like it doesn't scratch that itch. And I don't know. I just feel like I wish when it came out that I had been more receptive to it, because even before I had it was really Skyward Sword. Like when I went online and saw the reviews of the game, it's like I felt really vindicated. I was like, everyone agrees. Even like as a kid playing the game, I felt like let down in some way. I was like, wasn't what I was hoping for. And it's interesting that a lot of people feel the same way at the time. But anyway, I think it's time for a short message. If you want to be able to support me as a creator, there's several ways that you can do that. Become a member on Patreon. It gives you access to exclusive bonus features and early access content in all of my filmmaking projects. Stuff like early access to scripts that I'm writing, storyboards, previs, rough cuts, and music that I compose. I'm a composer, and any music that you've heard in the background of this video was my music. So go to Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you listen to music and type in Joe Kendrick. That's JoeKendrick. Look up Joe Kendrick on Spotify. And welcome back. But yeah, I mean, I guess as I was saying, just to wrap up that conversation, I really fell in love with Skyward Sword when I replayed it on the Switch, and I really like what it does, and especially compared to Breath of the Wild. I've heard some other people say this, right? That you put Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild's strengths together, and that's a perfect experience. And I think Tears of the Kingdom is an interesting example, because in some ways it gets close to merging the best of both worlds together. And in certain ways, it's a big step towards that direction. But I'd like to see the series kind of keep going. And I don't know. I don't want to say too much about Tears of the Kingdom yet. I'll reserve that, I think, for its own video. Maybe I could talk more about this then. But this question of what's next for Zelda, just like as an old school fan, I feel like I don't want to say that they should always be looking back, but I do think that there's things that they reevaluated with Breath of the Wild, but maybe should have looked back to more. And I think there's a combination there, looking forward while looking back. And Nintendo does both with its Zelda series. And I feel like that's key to growth, is always looking both forwards and backwards, thinking about how can you do something new. And I want the Zelda series to be new, to innovate, to be creative. That's what I love about the Zelda series. But I never want it to forget what its strengths are. So I don't know. I feel like I've been kind of vague, and it opens up a whole can of worms to get more into this discussion, perhaps in a future video. So I don't know. These are all things to think about. But I will say, just like offhandedly, is like I really love the story of something like Twilight Princess, where you get to experience the story. Same with Wind Waker, and I hope that future Zeldas can do that, because I think that that's so impactful for those Zelda games, for Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. The fact that you live that adventure, the story is meaningful, and you're a part of it. When people are talking about Link being a hero, they're not referencing some past event. They're talking about the mission you just completed. And like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have a lot in that in their side quests. You can be a part of a community, and you will be thanked for it as a part of the side quest. But for the main story, it's both of those games, the story is very distant. And I do think that that is something that, compared to the stories of past Zelda games, I would prefer something more like Wind Waker. And I think Wind Waker is a good example. Maybe I'm biased at the, looking at the channel, but in my opinion, Wind Waker strikes such a good balance of a linear story with an open world. And I think if people really want that freedom that Breath of the Wild offered, that, all right, no barriers, no borders, the world is open, go wherever you want, I'm not going to tell you what to do, I think that's fine. But I think maybe combining that with a linear story, with a main quest that has a clear sequence, I don't think that would be a bad compromise if that's what would empower a more meaningful narrative that can allow for moments as powerful as the ones from Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, that came from doing things in a certain order. And if not a certain order, then I don't know, you could have like tiers of the story, right? Not like T-I-E-R. T-E-I? T-I-E. I think it's T-I-E-R-S. Excuse me. I'm not typing it, so I have that, what do you call it? It's not dyslexia. There's nothing. It's just like, if I can't visualize it, I would have to write it down to know if I'm spelling it wrong or right. Verbalizing the spelling of a word is not enough for me to catch if I've spelled it right or wrong. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm a visual learner. That's what I'm trying to say. But I think like having a story that's more tiers based could be a solution as well. Like, do the first 3 dungeons, and you can do those in any order, and that'll unlock a story beat. Do the next 3 dungeons, and that'll unlock a story beat. And then that opens up the boss. Whatever it is. Like, you could have a system like that, where the dungeons can be completed in any order, but the story, it's like, that's kind of what Ocarina of Time does, right? And I think that works. Like, with its second half of the game, you can do a lot of those dungeons in any order, but there's still like a really nice main quest, and I feel like that you as a player get to be a part of. And I just feel like that's such an important element of my relationship with Zelda growing up and what helped me fall in love with the series. So it's just, I want to see Zelda go back to its roots, which is what this video is about. Let me know what y'all think should be in the little cave there. This is a really simple build, so I didn't say much really about. Sometimes a time-lapse audio will go by and I don't really say much even about what I'm modeling, but let me know if you have any thoughts down below about any ideas or locations that you want to see implemented in this version of the map. As always, as I always say, I really do invite feedback and criticism and notes, good and bad notes. Don't be mean about it, but I do invite your ideas, and I want to know what you have to say. And just like, I'll go ahead and ask, like, I have this cave here, and of course in the original Zelda game, that's where you get a sword, right? So what should be in the cave in this version of the world? Comment down below, kind of what, any ideas that you have. I am really glad with how things lined up too, and you can kind of see it from a distance as well, but there's a certain kind of layout of the original NES game with how the starting screen relates to the rivers and the region of the map that it's in. And I'm very glad that kind of worked out with the spot in the map that I found for it. It's kind of in line with some of the geographical features from the original game. And it's like, I can't like sweat too much over map stuff, because there's some stuff that just will not line up the way it did in a different game. This is a new version of the map. Things won't line up perfectly. It's a new creative endeavor. Even if I'm still trying to make Hyrule, it's a new version of it. Trying to fit within the design of the Wind Waker. But I do think about it. I'm trying my best to make things make sense within reason. But anyway, I think it's time to wrap up the video. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you want to be able to support me as a creator, become a member on Patreon. Gives you all kinds of exclusive access to behind the scenes bonus features for my filmmaking content, early access to scripts that I'm writing, rough cuts, storyboards, all kinds of stuff, music that I compose. I'm a composer. Any music that you've heard in the background of this video was my music. So listen to Joe Kendrick on Spotify or Apple Music to hear more of that. So thank y'all so much for watching. All this to say, I'll let y'all go.